And we've been missionaries with the Christian Missionary Alliance since 1988, and we served for 3 years in Quito, Ecuador, which is the capital city. We then moved to Guayaquil and spent 20 years in the city of Guayaquil, the city of 3 million. And then almost 10 years ago, we transitioned to Uruguay, basically because we worked ourselves out of a job in Ecuador and passed the torch on to the Ecuadorian National Church. So when the mission actually, when they left Ecuador, when they passed the torch on there, they had been there for 112 years and left 306 churches in Ecuador, 25 of which were Quechua speaking and the rest were all Spanish speaking. And so that was actually a happy thing to actually leave Ecuador in the sense that to work ourselves out of a job, which is what we're supposed to do. Unhappy in that it's hard to leave someplace where our kids grew up and where our best friends actually are still there in Ecuador. I'm probably getting ahead of myself here. So a little bit about our family. Actually, we have two grown children. Brian is 33 years old. He got married 5 years ago to Sarah. They got married in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania, and they live in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And they gave us our very first granddaughter 8 months ago. This is Allison. So we've been doing a lot of babysitting, spending time with her and with Brian and Sarah. She's going to be the one that makes it difficult for us to go back. We're scheduled to go back on August 9th. But first grandchild, so this is interesting. We'll cross that bridge when we get there. We also have a grown daughter. Elizabeth is 29 years old, and she married Glenn Garcia a year and a half ago in the city of Montevideo, Uruguay. So it was kind of a destination wedding, and the reason that we did the wedding there was because home is where mom and dad are, basically, and even though she grew up in Ecuador, and it just seemed like it was easier to do there. And so actually that was a huge ministry opportunity that they did get married in Montevideo. Because in our almost 10 years there in Uruguay, we've made a lot of different friends, different age groups, from octogenarians down to teens, and from different places in society. And so we were able to invite everyone that we'd made friends with to the wedding, and they heard the gospel presented, and they saw a Christian wedding, which was kind of a novelty for anybody in Montevideo. So they now both live in Mississippi, and they both work for Johnny and Friends with special needs kids. Actually, Glenn is the IT guy, and Elizabeth is part of the Mississippi office of Johnny and Friends. So they work with local churches, and they do events for families with special needs children. So that's kind of that's been her dream for a long time. So she's living the dream. This is the flag of Uruguay. Usually it doesn't have an I in the middle of it, but and one thing, when we did that transition from Ecuador to Uruguay, and God gave us this verse before we went there: forget the former things, do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I'm making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. And so what's the new thing that he was doing? Well, part of it was, don't dwell on the past, actually, is the first phrase there. And part of that was, don't go to Uruguay and then say, well, in Ecuador, we did it this way, because nobody wants to hear that, That gets old after a while. And Uruguay is very different from Ecuador, although we were targeting the same group of people, professionals, but it's a very different culture. And so God said, well, don't dwell on the past, don't dwell on what you've done in the past, just dwell on what I'm doing in the present. But the other thing was that it was difficult to leave our friends, because in 20 years in Guayaquil, we really are best friends in the world are in Guayaquil. And there's 4 families, actually, from the last church that we planted in Guayaquil that have visited us in every place that we've been. They've been in Pennsylvania, they've come to see us in Uruguay, and then, of course, in Ecuador, we're there all the time. So they've seen all of our worlds. So it was difficult to leave friends and go to something totally new and different. We weren't sure what it was going to feel like or look like. And yet, when we got there, it felt like it was coming home. So we knew it was a God thing that we had been able to transition to Uruguay. Now, if you don't know where it is, it's sandwiched between two giants. Between Brazil and Argentina, Brazil's the sixth largest country in the world. It's immense. And so they say that if Brazil sneezes, Uruguay gets a cold. Uruguay is just that tiny dot. It's so small that they really don't have the ability to be self-determining. So they're kind of dependent on what Brazil does economically and also on Argentina and what they do economically. So, but very beautiful country, great place to live. 4 seasons. We had come from 20 years in Guayaquil. Guayaquil has 2 seasons, hot and hotter. It's like living in a terrarium. It's miserable, basically. There's 2 months of the year are pretty comfortable. June and July in Guayaquil are comfortable. The rest of the year is miserable. Just extremely hot and humid. So we were happy to go to Uruguay where there are 4 seasons. Gets down to 30 degrees, but it never snows. And it could get up to 100, in Montevideo it gets up to 100. Some of the other places it might get up to 106, but it's only just for a few weeks, so it's not really a problem. So we are really thrilled with the 4 seasons, actually. Uruguay means river of the painted birds, so remember that if you ever get on Jeopardy and you might win a lot of money, Uruguay means river of the painted birds. It's home to 3.3 million people, 1.8 of which live in the capital city of Montevideo. So there's Montevideo, and then everything else is the interior. It's an estimated 88% of the population is of European descent, mostly Italian and Spanish descent, with a little bit of French, a little bit of German, a little bit of British. So basically, we went there, and now in Ecuador, everybody knew immediately that we were foreigners, because the typical Ecuadorian is about that high, and their dark complexion. And so we stood out, because like maybe 3% of the people in Ecuador are white. So we go to Uruguay, almost 90%, white, blue eyes, blonde hair. So we blend in until we open our mouths. Now, we open our mouths and they know they're foreigners, right? So there are 4 cows per person in Uruguay, so there's 12 million cows, and there's 6 sheep per person. So basically, you tour the country. From Montevideo, if you go 6 hours up to the right, you're in Brazil. Go 6 hours to the left, you're in Argentina. So you can go almost anywhere in Uruguay in 6 hours. And between Montevideo and wherever that is, all it is pasture land. It's basically flat, and it's grazing, it's pasture land. One of the huge activities is the asado, when you cook meat over fire. This little metal basket is you pile your firewood in there, you light it up, wait till the coals drop, then you sweep the coals under the grate, and you slow cook your meat. Average Uruguayan eats 135 pounds of beef per year. And and the little thing with the little blocks of cheese, that's called a provolonera. You cook provolone cheese in there, and it's great. They do this every weekend, and sometimes more than every weekend. It's like an all-day activity. Like we would do this once a month after church. And so we got the idea, we really ought to have the food ready for when the people get here after church. So somebody would run over to where we were cooking the meal. They'd leave church early. They'd go there. They'd light the fire. They'd wait till the coals drop. They'd sweep the coals under, get the meat started so that it would be ready when people got there. People would get there and they'd say, "What in the world are you doing? You're doing it all wrong." Because the idea is you spend time with people. You go buy the wood together. You buy the meat together. You go home. You light the wood, you wait, you talk while you wait for the coals to drop, and then you cook the meat together. So, we had it wrong, we were rushing into it, and we got to have it ready when they come. So it's more of a social convention that they do every Saturday and Sunday, and it's a great cultural event, actually. Asado is one of the things that we've come to love and appreciate. Obviously, we're not vegetarians, but it's like... the signature Uruguayan sandwich is called the chivito, and actually chivo is a goat, but it does not have goat meat. It has Canadian bacon, regular bacon. It'll have either beef or chicken, depending on what you prefer. And it's got olives and palm hearts and lettuce and tomatoes and cheese. And if I said it was a sandwich. You can get it in bread. This is actually it's a plated chivito without the bread, and it comes on a bed of French fries. So this is the 100% Uruguayan sandwich that almost everybody eats on a regular basis. So if you go to a restaurant there, you'll definitely see chivitos. Gauchos, or cowboy culture, is a huge part of the culture because there's so many sheep and cows. It's all open grazing land, so basically the cowboy culture, that's where the asado came from, and so that's a huge part of culture there. If you notice right here, that is a native ostrich. I guess you would call it an emu. They're not that tall, they're about that tall, but that is something that you will see as you drive throughout Uruguay. You'll see they call them ñandú. And then mate is another thing that is, everybody drinks mate. Anybody tried mate here? It looks like ground up grass, or kind of like green tea, and you drink it in this little thing. This is actually, that's called the mate, the little recipient, and it's made out of a gourd, a dried gourd, and then you put the hierba, or the herb, into the mate. You pour hot water on it, and to see the metal straw, and then you just pass that around. It's a group event. And so they're encouraging everybody, don't share your mate during COVID, you know, I guess. And so, but again, it's something, if you're come to Uruguay, you're traveling around, you'll see at sunset, a lot of people pull off the side of the road, they'll get lawn chairs out of their trunk, they'll bust out the mate, they'll sit there in their lawn chairs, and they'll drink mate while they watch the sunset. Another curious thing that we saw at a couple of different beaches there was that when the sun sets, just when it goes down below the horizon, they break out in applause. And that was a new thing to us, and we're thinking, an atheist country, it's the most secular country in Latin America, and they're applauding, but who are they applauding? You know, like, it's kind of sad. I mean, it's interesting, I mean, but sad at the same time. But mate, actually we now have lawn chairs in our trunk. We don't drink mate a whole lot though, but we do like to watch the sunsets. But again, when you're drinking it in a group, obviously you're talking to each other. You don't have the phone in your hand and the texting, but you're actually conversing on that. So actually it's a positive thing in that respect, yeah.
What does that taste like?
It's bitter. Once it's washed out, because you keep pouring hot water on it over and over and over again, because you're sharing and sharing and sharing it. And so when it gets washed out, yeah, I keep moving off camera, right? when it gets washed out, actually, I enjoy it. But it is a diuretic. They have different strengths of mate. And the first couple of times that some of the pastors shared it with me, I didn't know any different. After the second time, I noticed, within 10 minutes, you know, I'm in the bathroom. So it's like a diuretic. So if I do mate, I'll buy the not the strong, but the lower grade, you know. But it is, it's bitter. It's not something that probably most North Americans would not like it. A lot of the ladies, what they'll do, since it's not fashionable to be seen putting sugar in your mate, they might put sugar in their thermos in the water, so every time they pour water on it, they're sweetening their mate. So that's how you can get around that if you have a sweet tooth. But it's a great custom. What really baffles me, though, because you will see people, a lot of the vehicles there are standard shift, and you'll see people, their thermos under one arm, their mate in their other hand, and they're driving and stick shift. Sometimes texting also. I don't know how you do that, but anyway, it's a huge part of the culture. Soccer is extremely important, and I knew his name and it just escaped me. But actually, there was a poster of this same soccer player on a huge billboard on a building on the boardwalk in Montevideo, and underneath it said "Todopoderoso," all powerful. So that's kind of their view of soccer. They're good soccer players. They're viewed as kind of gods. And man, I can't think of his name. That's terrible. But very important. So, Uruguay, most secular nation in Latin America, because of the European descent, that almost 90% European descent, okay, it's unlike all of the rest of the whole continent. Nothing like Ecuador, as it were, because it's basically European. 80% divorce rate. Most people don't get married, they'll just live together, but of the few that do get married, there's a huge percentage of divorce. 15%, actually it's 15.7% suicide rate from the 13 to 33-year-olds. So that's kind of scary when you consider that it's not the whole population, and then you throw COVID in on top of that, and it's terrible. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it was up around 20%. It is a hopeless society, and I suppose because of the fact that it's godless, they're atheistic in general, and agnostic, and so they throw all values out. It's like postmodern culture. There's no absolutes. And so what do you do when there's no absolutes? Life becomes hopeless. 60% atheistic or agnostic. And the three least valued attitudes are hard work, saving money, and religious faith. It's like, whoa. So quite different. Postmodern thought. Well, that's what I made reference to, that there's no absolutes. What is truth? You can't know truth. I mean, it's on a sliding scale. There really are no absolutes. Suspicious of any organized religion. They think that pastors are charlatans, and the only thing, they're just after your money. That's all they care about. And they view a lot of Pentecostal television where they see people on the ground twitching and foaming at the mouth, and that's their concept of evangelicalism or Christianity. And so you don't want to just go out and say, hey, I'm an evangelical or I'm a Christian, because they're going to think, oh yeah, you're weird. You know? And so you need to be careful what you say, how you say it, when you share it. Most secular country and city in all of Latin America. Arts are extremely important. They highly value the arts, ballet and orchestras, anything artistic. Some of my words aren't coming. Number one activity is complaining. So they love to talk. They love to express their opinions. And so if you get, if you're seated at a table like that size and you have like 6 people around the table, you'll have about 3 conversations going at once. Because 2 on 2 on 2 will be talking with each other because they love to be heard and they love to express their opinions. And they love to complain, so everything's, it's like, oh, it's horrible. Just funny story, we were at Ridgeway Alliance Church in White Plains, New York, and they had one Uruguayan in the congregation. We were there one Sunday morning, and we knew, let's call him Juan, and we knew Juan, and so we're sharing this, and it said, and the number one activity in Uruguay is complaining. And there were like 300 people there in the sanctuary that morning, and they all of a sudden looked at Juan. and so everybody was saying, now I understand. It's like, his wife is Cuban. She looked at him and she said, now I understand. And so apparently it's true. That actually the person that said the number one activity is complaining. It's actually a Uruguayan sociologist writing about Uruguayan culture, and she said number one activity is complaining. Most psychologists per capita, everybody goes to a psychologist, including your dogs. It's at about, not everybody, 50%. Buenos Aires, right across the river in Argentina, Buenos Aires is a little bit less, but basically 51% of the population go to a psychologist. And they're very nostalgic. They're backwards looking. They don't look forward. And what do they look back at? Well, they look at particularly the World Cup soccer. When they beat Brazil in Brazil, it's called a Maracanazo. And actually, this was an advertisement a few years ago when they had the World Cup in Brazil again, the ghost of 1950. So what they were hoping was that at that World Cup they would beat Brazil in Brazil again. And so that is something that they look back on with great pride. Another thing, you remember the miracle in the Andes in 1972? There was a plane went down in the Andes Mountains with a rugby team from Uruguay. Actually, the team the school from which that team came actually is just a half a block away from the place that we've lived for the past 10 years. And so like 46, 47 people went down, 16 men walked off the mountain, basically because it was a rugby team, because they all worked together. People have said if it had been a soccer team, they all would have died because the superstars would have struck out on their own and they wouldn't have worked together. And I don't know. But rugby, they say that's the reason that they were able to survive that. But they look back. I mentioned nostalgia. They actually have a nostalgia day. It's August 24th or 25th, depending on what day it falls on, where they stay up and they sing. They'll put afro wigs on and peace signs and then John Lennon glasses and everything, and they'll sing the oldies all night long. Nostalgia Day every year, because they look back. So, okay, my dog died, I wrecked my car, my mother died, but you know, life is good. We beat Brazil in Brazil back in 1950. And, you know, they're backward looking, they're not looking forward. Some of the iconic things you'll see there is the hand on the beach at, this is in a resort town called Punta del Este. And Steph likes to say, well, it's the hand of God, or hand of man reaching out to God. Actually, we thought that for a number of years until we saw a little plaque that said, the monument to the drowning person, no more drownings. And so, anyway, we'll look at it the way we like to look at it. Another iconic thing there is Casa Pueblo. It was a man's house. He died recently, actually. He was in his 80s, and it's now a hotel. And he was friends with Picasso, and they say he was the enemy of the straight line. He liked curves and anything rounded, so you can kind of tell that when you look at the house that he built. If you get an aerial view of that, the thing, it looks like it's on acres. I mean, this looks small here. Look at an aerial view, and it's quite amazing. So a lot of people come to visit Casa Pueblo. Some of the headlines, and this is Pepe Mujica. If you Google the poorest president in the world, Pepe Mujica will pop up. He's 2 presidents ago, actually, so he's not president right now, but when he was president, the Pope was actually inaugurated or installed, because the Pope was from Buenos Aires, just across the river. He said, well, I'm not going to go attend the inaugural Mass for the Pope. I'm not a Christian. I'm not a believer. Send somebody who believes, you know, so that was his statement. Marijuana is legal, abortion is legal, and gay marriage is legal in a socialist country, basically. Well, it's a democracy, but socialism has been, let's see, for the past 20, 25 years, mostly socialist presidents. But salt is illegal. You cannot put salt on the table in the restaurants because it's bad for your health. Now, if you ask for it, they will bring it, but they got fined if you did not ask for it, and Wow. They have it in the school system. Our daughter actually came down to some of her student teaching for Nyack College in Montevideo at the American school. They don't even have salt. You can't get salt in the cafeterias in any of the schools because it's bad for your health. But we are the salt of the earth. Now, Carrasco Airport is voted #1 in the world by architects. And I need to, what time is this?
You have until 10:15. You got plenty of time.
Oh, okay. But Carrasco Airport, it's fairly new. Actually, it's probably about 8 years old now, but it was voted #1 airport in the world by architects. And it's not that big, but it's a beautiful airport, and it's all paperless, so it's kind of really quick to get through there. And that's about 10 minutes from where we had been living in the last 10 years. And our mission statement is to develop vibrant communities of faith where people discover their true significance in Jesus Christ. Our main activity over the years has always been church planting. And that's been one of our greatest joys. Now, we're not doing it alone. Mark and Cora Taube, he is the leader of the church planting team. He is a missionary kid from Buenos Aires, grew up in Argentina. Actually, he had difficulty when he was on home assignment because he was in a Spanish-speaking school, and he struggled in English when he came on home assignment. And his wife, Cora, grew up in Quito, Ecuador. Her parents were teachers at the Alliance Academy. And then Matt and Jeanette Griffin, Matt also, his parents were missionaries in Argentina. Greenfields are the most recent arrivals. For a while, for about a year, they had 3 children under the age of 2 while they were in language school, of all things, trying to learn new. Well, and actually, but Daniel grew up in Chile. He's an MK from Chile and Mexico. His wife was not an MK, so anyway, great couple. And then the Hulls. Actually, Jimmy at one point had served, well, his parents came to run a guest house at the Alliance Academy for about a year, so he had some of an introduction to Ecuador early on in his life. So all of these ministries, pre-evangelistic and evangelistic, that we're doing as a team. I am the field director, so I do a lot of administration, yes.
So Bruce, is Jimbo Hall the brother of Toby Hall?
He is, yes, that's correct.
So Toby Hall is an Alliance missionary in Burkina Faso, right? And you mentioned that a lot of these missionaries are missionary kids, and so culture isn't really an issue for them, right?
You would think, but it is.
Really?
Yeah, no, it is. I mean, that language is less of an issue for them, but culture, yeah, Uruguay's like a unique animal. It's just so different.
So,
well, and just a story then. So it just about Daniel. And let me just back up a little bit. Just culturally, Uruguayans have absolutely zero interest. If you go and you're visiting, and they might notice, oh, maybe they're from North America. Zero curiosity about you, as getting to know you as a friend or anything. Uruguayans do life with 2 groups of people: family. And then also those that they have gone to grade school, middle school, high school, and maybe college together with, and those are your groups for life. Wow. And they have zero interest of letting anybody else into those groups. Of course, family, well, by marriage maybe, but they're not the least bit interested. So even though we're not a creative access country, it's a huge challenge because they don't care. They don't want to know you. From just point blank. But then if they find out you're a religious foreigner, oh my goodness, they'll run like the wind. So it's challenging to do ministry in this most secular nation in Latin America. There's another sociologist who did a study on this whole issue of being an insider-outsider. So what was the study? Within the city of Montevideo, they did a study on a person that moved from one neighborhood to another neighborhood. So say they moved from Positos to Malvin. Born and raised in Montevideo, how long would it take them to be accepted as insiders in their new community as Malvivenses? Having been born and bred in the city of Montevideo, 9 years.
Wow.
Same city. It's like, so they're suspicious of people within their own country, and then foreigners, it just gets worse. So it's a challenge to do ministry. So we're telling these stories to Daniel before they arrived. They're in their first term, getting ready to come back on home assignment in May, because there'll be a council. So he's hearing these stories, and so we had a conference, an annual conference in the city of Montevideo. We hosted, it was like actually a regional conference, and so he says, well, we were actually all in the same hotel, and so he kind of made friends with one of the waiters. And so every time he was down there for a meal, this guy would come up and they'd talk, and everything. Well, okay. That was out of the mold, but he would engage him in conversation. So this went on for about 3 days. And so finally, on the end of the 3rd day or whatever, the waiter asks him, well, what do you do? And he says, well, I'm a missionary, the Christian Missionary Alliance. We were there for 2 more days. Never looked at him, never spoke to him again. It was like total shutdown. And so Daniel said, I didn't believe you guys, but it's true. It's like, another sociologist's take on Uruguayans. A Uruguayan's take on Uruguayans is easy to meet, but difficult to get to know. Like if you meet them on the street, you ask them a question, directions about how to get someplace, they will tell you. They'll be extremely helpful. In Guayaquil, they'd say, go down to the corner where McDonald's is and turn right. And not true. They'll send you the wrong way. Guayaquil. But here, man, they're so helpful and polite, and that's refreshing in a lot of ways. But you don't get beyond the surface. You try to find out, who they really are. Get to meet family. Aren't going there. Anyway, so team ministries. It is challenging, but the big event of this term was actually the planting of the Elysburg Church. Now, the Alliance has been in Uruguay since 1967, when an Argentine missionary came across the border and planted a number of churches up on the border with Brazil and with Argentina. And so the Alliance has been there all that time. They did not invite the U.S. Alliance to come until 1999, and they invited us to come at that point in time to help with their Bible Academy, but also to plant churches. So this is something that's been prayed about for at least since 1999 when the Alliance went there, that we'd be able to plant a church in Montevideo, which is now 3 years old. A lot of those are teen people, so it's not a huge church. Actually, average attendance this past year was like 36. If we could get all of the Uruguayans together that we've gotten to know through various venues throughout the years, we might have 50 Uruguayans, but you'll never see that many in church on a Sunday. They're not churchgoers. They don't have those rhythms or customs of church attendance, so we're building the box. They don't have a box to put us in, but we're building the box. But this was a huge advance. This is probably the most exciting thing that happened this term was the planting of the church. And another thing that happened was a year ago, January, there were 8 people that said, we want to get baptized. And so we actually wrote a course. Steph and I, we taught the course. We bought a pool. We rented a venue, actually, because we heard that like 70 people, family and friends, 70 people wanted to come. We couldn't do that at the YMCA that we were renting at the time. And so we rented a place. We bought Bibles as gifts. We got T-shirts for everybody. And then patient zero came to Montevideo on March 12th. She came from Italy and Spain when Italy and Spain were just, it was an inferno as far as COVID was concerned. She came to the airport with a temperature of 104, and she asked when she got into the airport, do I need to do something? Or, quarantine? And, oh, no. Next day she goes to lunch with her 84-year-old mother, and then that evening she went to a wedding with 500 people, 250 of which came down positive with COVID. So it was like a super spreader event. So the 13th, everything shuts down. We had scheduled the baptisms. It was either the 14th or the 15th. Anyway, so they were still waiting to get baptized. Actually, the church just last week had their first in-person meeting since COVID came. And so that's where they are at. Everything has been virtual since that time. But that was one of the most exciting things. 8 people wanted to be baptized. They've said, some of them said, well, we'll wait till you guys get back. We said, don't wait, but they're still waiting. Nobody has control over that. So the other exciting thing is that after praying for a number of years, we've actually been able to purchase a ministry center. For the past 10 years, everything that we have done, English camp, couples dinners, church, we've always had to rent another venue. Primarily the YMCA. That we do English camp at the YMCA. We did church at the YMCA. YMCA just opened back up a week ago also. And now they're not going to open on Sundays, so can't go back there. But good news is that we're purchasing this building, which actually will be a venue for every kind of event and activity that we do, from English camp to adventure camp to church, to couples dinners, to cooking classes, to English conversation courses, which are some of the things that we do. There are 2 pieces of paperwork that the owner didn't do properly, and so he's trying to get that cleared up. So pray that they would be able to get that paperwork done so that we could take possession. We were hoping for March, now maybe for April. But that is huge. The money is actually there. God graciously provided. And so we will have a place to house the church and all the other activities that we're doing. So what are some of the other activities? Reflection groups. What's a reflection group? Well, they're philosophical. They love to talk and complain. So instead of calling it a small group Bible study, we call it a reflection group where you can reflect and express your opinions. But it's a small group Bible study. And so this was the precursor of a group that we hosted in our home until we left in actually is, she's not there. I was going to point out who's, well, actually Miriam is co-leading now. She's co-leading the group in our absence, so that's huge that they're stepping up as leaders. And that's been our joy, was pastoring that group. Cooking class. Steph has done cooking classes in English and in Spanish with grade school girls, with teenage girls, and with adult ladies. And we will continue to do that in the ministry center. She's also led a variety of ladies' Bible studies throughout the years, and continued to do that up until we left to come home. She also has a teenage Bible study where they study the Bible, sometimes again in English, because sometimes they want to study it in English, so she'll accommodate that. Sometimes in Spanish, and they'll cook together. They'll study the Bible together, and they'll do some crafts together. English camp is something we've been doing for the past 9 years. And it's kind of like a DVBS, a Daily Vacation Bible School, but without the Bible. So it's a pre-evangelistic event. Because remember I mentioned those two groups. Okay, you do life with family and you do life with the people that you grew up with and went to school with. But, okay, what about, like for us, we come in, who do we have the opportunity to build bridges of friendship with that will bear the weight of the gospel? Okay, our neighbors, maybe if they open the door. And then the other group that we have a natural, unforced opportunity to do life with are the parents of the children that our kids go to school with. So it's a good thing we have a young team with lots of young children because the children are an open door to ministry. And we found that when our daughter came back. We were empty nesters when we went there. She came back to do some of her student teaching at the American school, and she immediately became, even though she was 20-some, became an open door to ministry at the American school for us and with some of our neighbors. And then they hired her at the American school, so she was there for a couple of years. So children are an open door to ministry. Well, so we do pre-evangelistic things to try and meet people that we otherwise wouldn't have any contact with. So at the YMCA, we started doing English camp. Like the first year, we had 9 kids. And I think the largest attendance we've had was like close to 50. And one of the phrases that we hear repeated frequently is, "We love the way that you love on our children." And so actually there are families coming to church now who we met through English camp, a pre-evangelistic on-ramp ministry, on-ramp to the church. And then the kids that aged out of English camp said, "We want to come back." And English camps for 5 to 13-year-olds, or 5 to 12. And so they couldn't come back. They came back as helpers. So we started Adventure Camp for 13 to 18-year-olders, and so it's an outdoor experiential leadership program where you learn about values, communication skills, but also outdoor skills, rock climbing and camping and different things. I taught a module on building a campfire, knot tying and things like that. So there's a variety of things that you do. So anyway, this has been something that's also been well received, but it's an on-ramp ministry. Couples dinners. We started, this is a couples dinner. What do? You offer couples a date night at a nice restaurant with good food and something entertaining. Now, this particular one, the entertainment was the photo booth. Now, sometimes it'll be live music. It could be a variety of things, different fun activities, and then we'll do raffles or we'll give things away, and then we'll offer like a 15 to 20 minute talk on how you can have a healthier relationship with whomever. We used to call it marriage dinners. We stopped doing that because we weren't getting married couples. We were getting couples. Anyway, it seemed safer to call it a couples dinner. Sometimes we get 2 ladies coming together because their husbands wouldn't come. So anyway, they're learning about how they can have a healthier relationship. And Thanksgiving dinners is something that we've done everywhere we have been. And it's so well received because all the Uruguayans have seen Thanksgiving in movies. And they're all curious about it. And they say, "Man, what's turkey really like?" And so pre-evangelistic, we share the story of Thanksgiving. This is why the Pilgrims celebrated Thanksgiving, and they expressed thanks to God for His graciousness to them and allowing them to survive, even though 50% of their number were decimated in that first year. And yet God provided. Squanto came, and He helped them learn how to make it through another winter, and you know the story. So we share the story, and then we give them the opportunity to share something for which they're thankful, or multiple things, and then we pray God's blessing over the meal. And so they're hearing the gospel, and so it's something that has been very, very popular, very well received. English conversation clubs. Actually, Jimbo was leading this group with a bunch of elderly ladies, octogenarian ladies, in Positos, in the city of Montevideo. Positos is a neighborhood that is 0.2% evangelical, and it's full of Jewish atheists. They went there after the war, escaping the Nazis, and these ladies, they don't want to talk about it. And through the years, he would try and bring up different themes about Christianity, and they go, oh, no, we don't do that, we don't go there, don't want to talk about that. Well, one day, they're at Pearl's house. She was in her 80s. She had been widowed for at least 15 years, if not longer, and she had a piano and timbrel. Jimbo's wife was playing the piano because Pearl liked to hear the piano music. And so she was talking to Jimbo, and she said, I am just so old, and I am so tired, and I've been a widow for so long, and life's just not worth living. I just want to die. And so he says, well, are you ready to die? And she says, well, I don't know. What do you mean? And so he shared the gospel with her and asked, would you like to receive Christ as your Savior, your Lord and Savior? She said, yes. Prays with her on the spot. Now, at the time, the church hadn't been planted, but we were meeting twice monthly in one of our homes, actually, on a Sunday worship thing. And she was there that next Sunday. She was there, and she brought her 65-year-old daughter-in-law. And she was faithful until she actually passed into God's presence here, within a couple of years months after Jimbo had prayed with her. And so God is at work drawing people to himself. Book club, another pre-evangelistic opportunity to meet people. And so Juan and Maria, actually, we met, not Juan and Maria, but Silvana and Santiago, who I spoke about in the service. We met actually through the book club. So it's a way of building bridges of friendship to people you normally wouldn't rub shoulders with. Winning English. One of the parents of a girl who came to English camp, he was one of the guys that said, I love the way you love on our kids, and you do all things really professionally. And he asked, after one of the English camps, he asked Mark, he said, are you guys religious or something? He says, everything you do well. And said, yeah, well, we work for the Christian Alliance, and we're helping them with some projects, and we do English activities and things like that. He said, can you come and teach English to a group of boys that I have? I'm their soccer coach, and they're at-risk boys, and they probably won't have a chance to study English. Would you come and teach English to them? And this was because of English camp. So for a year, actually, our team was able to teach #Winning English. Now, there are a couple of other couples. Peter and Laura Marshall are serving as local church leadership developers in the Salto Alliance Church, which is up on the Argentine border. And then Randy and Alicia Clark did one term in Ecuador 15 years ago. They were there one term. And actually, he's retirement age now. They're coming back for one more term, 4 years. Unfortunately, because they don't have residency anymore, they weren't able to get into Uruguay, so they just went to Paraguay about 2 months ago. And they're helping out there until the borders of Uruguay open again. And actually, Alicia is Jewish, and when they had been there 15 years ago, in Positos, the place that's full of Jewish atheists, they had an amazing way of making contacts, and they still have a lot of friends there that they maintain contact with through email, even till today. So they're going to go back and work in Positos, reaching out to in particular, Jewish people there. Hebrew people. There are two other couples that live in Montevideo, and they're the regional leadership couples, Tim and Melanie Wendell, and he's the RD for the whole region from Mexico down to Chile. And then Keith and Terry Newburn. Keith is like the finance guy for the whole region. And so they can actually live wherever they want to, but they need to be close since they work so closely together. So their responsibilities are not actually to the church plant, but when they have time, they help, and they've been a huge help, actually, in everything that we do with English Camp, Adventure Camp, with the church plant, and all of those things. So they also live in the city of Montevideo. And you already prayed for these. I'll just leave those up there. But any other questions? I probably took all my time. That's a lot of information.
No, thank you for that fire hose of information. That was really fascinating.
Yeah. What's the average income of the?
You know, that is a great question. Boy. It's very expensive to live there. I mean, as far as purchasing property, purchasing buildings, rents, horrendously expensive, condominium fees, horrendously expensive, vehicles, horrendously expensive because everything that comes in is not produced there, so it gets 100% tax on it. And so those kinds of things are very expensive. And so Uruguay a lot of times pops on web pages where they say, you know, if you're an expat or you want to retire someplace overseas, go to Uruguay. Lots of fresh air, clean air, and fresh water, which is true. And it's beautiful. True, but expensive. I need to look that up because it baffles me how people can make ends meet. And they always complain they're not making enough, you know. So, I mean, realistically speaking, they'd have to be making middle class or above. They got to be making $2,000-3,000 a month more. I mean, you know, that question comes up. I really need to do some research. Yeah. When we went there, it was so expensive to set up housekeeping. When that was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, if you wanted to buy a small, simple no-frills refrigerator, simple no-frills small oven/stove, washer, dryer, simple no-frills, $800 each, and small and no frills. Fast forward today, like when Greenfields came 3 years ago, those prices had all dropped. Now you can get all of those things for like 300 and some. Now you can get the more expensive ones too. But so anything household related, including furniture, has dropped. In 10 years, that stuff has dropped.
Huh.
Amazingly. And probably because of China. And they must have relaxed their import duties or something. But in general, yeah, it's expensive to live there.
So Bruce, do you find that there's something that works with people when you're talking to them about the Lord? And by the way, I know exactly what you're feeling, because when we were in France for our term, I remember talking to a guy, and we were chatting along, and he was complimenting me on my French, and it was fun. And then he said, "So, why is an American like you marooned in this town?" And so I told him I'm a missionary, and then honestly the guy like stopped the conversation, walked away, didn't even acknowledge that I existed. It was like I was lower than dirt, and I was like,
yeah, you nailed it, right?
You know?
It's the same thing.
And I remember feeling guilty, like, why am I here? Like, I'm enjoying going to the park with my kids, but I can't talk to the French because they make fun of my French, and you know, like we had a church full of misfits, and is that what you guys?
Yeah, it's the same dynamic, and the only thing I can say to that is that God always has a few people that He's drawing to Himself, and so what we need to do is pray for those divine contacts with the ones that He's drawing to Himself.
Right.
And a case in point would be with Terry when they first moved in, which has been about 5, maybe 6 years ago. So Terry, they ended up moving into a place that was a little bit further out than, it was out of our target area, but they couldn't find a house that would meet budget in the target area, so they went just a little bit out into a suburb and found a house that they liked in a huge neighborhood, this residential neighborhood. There's all kinds of people in there, and she actually met within, I don't know, the first 2 weeks that she was there, she met a hairdresser in that suburban area who, as it turns out, is a Christian, and who she said had formerly been part of a Bible study a few years previous that had been led by some missionary who had moved away. So she said to Terry, well, you know, Terry said, well, we'll start a Bible study. And, and so we were able to tap into this network. And of course, hairdressers, you know, a lot of people visit hairdressers. So we were able to tap into Alejandra's network of people. Now, obviously, all of them didn't come, but actually, I mean, it gave us the opportunity to restart what had been a small group Bible study,
Right.
which is still going today. So that's an example of God is always drawing some people. It's just a matter of finding them, praying for those divine contacts, because that's that's what it comes down to.
Well, and I think it's fascinating to have you come because our culture, even here in central Pennsylvania, is becoming more and more like Uruguay and Western Europe.
Yeah, so true.
So, you know, we have a lot to learn from you here in this traditional Christian part of the country.
Yeah, just learn to do creative things to find common ground somehow.
Yeah.
When we started the last church in Ecuador, we did a Bible study or two going, but basically for 2 years, we did nothing but pre-evangelistic activities. Going, scrapbooking classes, cooking classes. What are some of the other things? We had novenas. We did the Thanksgiving thing. We would have people over for Christmas. Common ground things, because they do Christmas. Look for things that you can do. But we did, for 2 years, we did pre-evangelistic activities until we had earned the right to be heard, until we had earned their trust. Now, this is Ecuador. It's a little different from Uruguay, but we're doing the same principles there. Let them know you, get to know them. Friendship evangelism, get to know them as friends. People don't care how much you know, biblically or in any other way. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So establish the friendships, demonstrate love, be the hands and feet of Jesus. And at some point, you can begin to talk about Christianity. And then you wait for a crisis to happen where they seek you out. But it takes time to do friendship evangelism. But as you say, that's got to be the way it's done here as well. It's so similar in that respect.
So the Wendells, they were in Spain.
They were in Spain for 10 years.
We actually went out with them. And then the couple, the Clarks, the Jewish gal and the old, I'm sure I'm not with those two. They were fascinating. They were they were like characters from a Seinfeld show. As missionaries, they were really neat. Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah, they're a great couple. We're glad they're coming back.
So do you have any need for a church like ours to be engaged with you guys in terms of English camps?
Well, praying and, English camp. Yeah, we always have teams that come down to help us do English camp. We basically depend on teams to be able to do English camp. And so, yes.
And that's always in the summer, though?
It's always the first week of July, first or second week of July. Now, there's also a need for adventure camp, and that always follows English camp. And we are going to try and actually do an English camp and adventure camp in February, because that's summer vacation. January, everybody's gone, but we're looking at the possibility of doing something in February. So it could be that there would be more opportunities opening up. We have some churches lined up, but yes, we can dialogue about that. Or a team maybe from multiple churches, depending on the case. Another thing that we have a need for consistently is with field forums, which is the equivalent of your prayer conference.
Yeah, right.
Usually like a 3-4 day thing every year. In our case, it's 5 days. But we need childcare teams to come down to take care of the kids, because we have like 13 kids, just with the team kids. And then if the Paraguay field comes over, then there's even more kids. And so we've consistently needed childcare teams to come down and just take care of the kids, do a DVBS with the kids while the parents are in business meetings and devotional times. So there is that need as well. I don't know what it's going to look like in the future, because they canceled with COVID. Field forums went by the wayside for a period. Hopefully that will be started up again. It's a huge need. Yeah.
So there's a possible interest in something, maybe not next February, but a February down the road, you might need a church to come and help.
There's a possibility, yeah. They did something in February this year, but it was virtual. Hopefully, within a year, we'll be able to get something present. I can't think of the word in English, presencial.
Gotcha, yeah.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Great to have the opportunity to connect with you. I don't think I've ever been to Elysburg before. That's terrible. And it's been a long time since we went on tour, as I mentioned. I haven't been on tour since the year 2000. So.
Wow.
Uh,
And so you probably know that we're just 4 or so miles away from Knoebels Grove. Have
I
you heard
saw
of
the
Knoebels
signs,
Grove?
yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's kind of our claim to fame here. Right?
yeah.
Would somebody stand up and just say a prayer over Bruce, and then we'll be dismissed and go downstairs? Do that. Mike, thank you.
Father, again, thank you for this time that we could learn about these people down there. We know that our country's changing too, and with the COVID, so many things. I just pray that this would get over so that people could open up. And Lord, we just pray for these people that they'd come to know you. I'm so glad for these people who dedicated their life and commitment and love to go down there and work with these people. And Lord, we know that it's getting harder and harder to witness for Jesus Christ, and we believe that the last days are coming. Things are transpiring so fast before our eyes that the harvest is white and ready to be harvested, but the workers need to go out, and we need to share the gospel, even though it's anti so much. Where we just got to show our love and what you did to people as you travel around the country. When you were here, you went and saw people's needs, and you met those needs, and the culture has changed. That Lord, we got to get to know them, as He said. They don't care how much we know unless how much we care about them, and give us a heart and a mind to wisdom to know how to deal with each situation. We thank you for the peers and all the others that are down there. Pray a special blessing in their life, and may they see a lot of fruit of their labor. Again, we praise you and thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.